When I investigated to get a hunch as to what caused it, I already had company. The fact that she found my car right away astonished me, as I was by far not the only one with a car here. But for asking right away, I was far too abashed, almost intimidated. She namely presented me what she understood under the term dressing up, and well, that was definitely out of my league. Without downgrading myself, but rather upgrading her entity, I looked at her dark red dress, her golden necklace, and the black hair which completed the composition. Without lying, I felt highly insecure even at the thought to take her with me to my parents. Not because I was ashamed, not even one tiny bit, but rather because her appearance made me go crazy and therefore prevented me from thinking grounded. Accordingly, I needed some time to readjust my mind and to think in complete, coherent sentences. While I was on the cusp of doing so, she initiated. "Hey, ready when you are." A little bit insecure regarding speech, I replied. "You're here, nice. How did you find my car so quickly?" "I didn't tell you about it, did I?" "You didn't, that's correct. But it was kind of a result of logic. I mean, without being too biased, you're unlikely to drive a sports car like you find them here around every corner. Since your car was the only one striking my attention between all of those others, I approached and saw you sitting in there. It reminded me spontaneously of one of my first thoughts when I had initially visited her inside the sector, so that I shared this memory with her to loosen the atmosphere. That's funny, because I considered the same when I entered this district for the first time. You namely just mentioned this certain principle, striking attention by not striking attention. Like someone with a supercar would polarize in Sector 2, I'm doing here, only for the opposite reason. While I was coming back to the actual topic occupying my mind, namely her unfathomable appearance I had not mentioned yet, my stuttering gradually returned. Anyway, actually, what I want to express, you look fabulous. When I had finished speaking, my heart skipped a first beat, a second one when she smiled. I must have appeared utterly constrained, but in fact she was already a superlative without specific clothes or makeup, so I just couldn't conceive at all what was going on in the heat of the moment. Therefore she guided the action for the most part, this time by calming my incapacitating amazement. "Thanks, nice of you, but I'm still Chloe after all, and you Aaron, right?" I just smiled and continued glancing at her. When I said that every particle of focus was laying on her, then I wouldn't lie, because it needed a rattling jolt from her to wake me up and to make me remember what we actually were up to. "Have you forgotten something, or can we depart?" Within a jerky motion, I grabbed the steering wheel and started the engine. For my conceptual eye, however, was still looking at her. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and successively whispered the words, traffic, driving, attention. I hoped it would bring me back to the realm of the here and now, where it was paramount to 1. Focus on the traffic, 2. Arriving at my parents' house in time, but fundamentally 3. Start driving in the first place. So I slowly accelerated and turned onto the main street, from where I took the usual route. Only that I didn't do that on my own. That in fact exacerbated everything. Because a simple task can become super exciting and effusively significant when someone else watches you doing it. Especially in my case, this was affecting many things. Furthermore, this factor for an introvert was many times higher than for an extro or ambivert. And when now certain people are being involved, the protagonist of the action has an affection for, then something like paralysis or inhibition emerges. I was experiencing this firsthand then, but after all managed to get to grips with it, to still drive safely and to not be too distracted from my surroundings. What I can say is that I liked right turns way more than left turns. However, after those first 5 minutes, I managed to involve my routine again, and from then on, the last part of the route was easy. But my excitement shifted up again, simultaneously with the prospect of my house, and was then referring to the encounter with my parents and how flashed they were going to be. I turned into the little driveway and parked the car, what I commanded with, Alright, we're there. Just in time. I guess time was on our side. I exhaled deeply as I pulled out the car key. Chloe remained mostly quiet, or rather speechless, for which I saw the reason a little bit later. Like I was once bewildered by the prospect of the sophisticated streets, Chloe was now, as she stepped out into the dark to gaze at the slightly illuminated neighborhood. It was kind of topsy-turvy. That difference can represent fascination in both ways. Pure prosperity for someone like me, and a mediocre life for her. I once came up with that the farmer and the princess allegory, and still feel prompted to hold on to that. Anyway, when I also had gotten out, I witnessed her standing there without anything but a dress and a thin jacket. I was wearing a fluffy winter jacket which made me appear 3 times as broad as I was without. We had deepest winter after all, so it was not a weather-related misconception from my side. Even more fascinating, therefore, was her behavior to just don't care about that. But soon my liability stepped in, and I decided to get her out of the cold as fast as possible. I touched her freezing cold hand and slowly guided her into the direction of the door. Like it was the case for me before, she needed someone to repulse the trance she was situated in. That I undoubtedly succeeded was proven by her wondering as to why it was so cold out there. I couldn't help but chuckle as I softly activated the doorbell to get us into the warmth. Maybe the nervousness was inhibiting my sense for temperature a bit, but for the sake of both our well-being, we needed to get inside quickly. After my first attempt to draw the attention on us waiting outside, it didn't take long for something to happen. Right on the other side of the door, I heard voices announcing Mom and Dad. I could perceive a faint whisper, saying, "They're here, going to the kitchen." The way it was pronounced told me right away that I was not the only one being in a flurry. Maybe Chloe was too, but Mom, Dad and I, certainly. And that, even before they had seen the actual reason why I was so crazily excited. Anyway, seconds later followed the action, namely the door opening and my mom standing face to face with us. Not really gentlemanlike, I entered first, but being aware of my mistake, I soon made up for that by holding the door open and taking Chloe's jacket away, with the intention to hang it on the clothes rack. What I didn't pay attention to was my mother still standing there next to us. After we had greeted each other, I asked her to go into the kitchen to take a seat, alluding that we would join them in a second. To my fascination, she didn't care too much about me, but rather dedicated 150% of her attention to Chloe. Not far-fetched to say, it was rude of my mother to gaze at her like that. But on the other side, yeah, it was definitely not something or someone you see on a daily basis. Accordingly, I took it with humor, and as a result smiled unobtrusively at Chloe, who reciprocated and thereby accepted to wallow in the glances of my mom. Alright, then let us proceed into the kitchen, shall we? I initiated to mainly contain further potential awkward incidents. For the beginning it was enough, albeit I was certain that the one or the other thing would be added to the score of weirdness. But anyway, when I had calmed down my mother and hung up Chloe's jacket, we were ready to finally join my father in the kitchen. When I had walked past the corner separating kitchen from the entrance corridor, I witnessed my dad concluding with last preparations related to the food. He retrieved the chicken from the oven, while my mother put several bowls onto the table, filled with several things. I assumed they pursued the strategy to provide a little bit of everything. Sadly, I neglected to tell them about the food habits of Chloe, so that they couldn't prepare something with certainty. It would have been so easy to just tell them that she ate like me. But however, after all, it was only a tiny thorn in the flesh, because there were actually many things that didn't include meat. No doubt, compared to John and Mary's food table, it was like cheeseburger versus a bowl of salad. But in the end, we wouldn't be suffering from famine, so no need to complain. Even despite the fact that we also could have invited some of our neighbors. However, when all bowls had been placed, we took a seat and initiated with a couple more formal words. Welcome, Chloe. Aaron. I'm really glad we get to know you finally. We heard so much about you, but nothing really personal. I mean, yes, it was partly very personal, but couldn't speak with you in person. That's what I wanted to say. Back then inside the hospital, we couldn't have foreseen that you would be of such a relevance. While Dad was shooting out one sentence after another, totally overwhelming Chloe, I prayed that he wouldn't speak directly about details or her appearance. Both were somehow no-goes as far as I evaluated. I mean, yeah, you look great was fine, but nothing compared to what my mother did before. Other than that, when he in some way alluded to what had been described with the term mayfly, then I saw myself responsible to interfere, even more compared to the former. I mean, we best began with a slow approach. When you play poker, the first step is not putting all in either. Yeah, it was inevitable to circumvent this topic. It was actually the reason why we were here. But in this regard, a soft approach was even more crucial. Correspondingly, I observed his words very closely, while I was bowed forth like a predator, ready to strike. But fortunately, he contained himself, so that his words were rather the transition to a little shallow session of small talk, where everyone was involved. Even I got to speak, even though I was not really a fan of superficial small talk.